On a quiet Saturday morning in Portland, beneath a sky the color of wet concrete, the bus stop on Division Street held only one soul. She sat hunched on the splintered bench, blonde hair matted and wild, clothes carrying the faint sour smell of too many nights without a washer. Her name was Elodie, though no one there knew it yet. In her raw, shaking hands she held a single photograph, edges curled from being touched too many times, the image already fading the way memories do when you try to clutch them too tightly. The picture showed her mother, laughing at a Christmas table 3 years earlier, eyes bright, cheeks flushed with wine and life. 8 months ago that same woman had been yellow-skinned and shrunken in a hospital bed, whispering "I'm scared" in a voice so small it barely belonged to her. Pancreatic cancer doesn't give you time for proper goodbyes. It just takes. Elodie hadn't slept in her apartment for 4 nights. She kept finding herself walking, riding buses to the end of the line and back, because stillness felt like drowning. Today would have been her mother's 54th birthday. The realization had hit her at 3 a.m. like a fist to the sternum, and she had dressed in the dark, grabbed the photograph, and left before the walls could close in again. Across the street, Collins Briggs walked with his daughter's hand tucked inside his. He was 35, broad-shouldered, permanently dusted with sawdust no matter how many times he showered. His hands were rough, cracked along the palms from years of swinging hammers and hauling lumber, but they were gentle when they needed to be, especially around Abigail. She was 6, small for her age, with brown eyes that looked like they'd already seen too much, and decided to love the world anyway. Their Saturday ritual was the farmer's market on 32nd and Hawthorne. Fresh strawberries in summer, hot apple cider in fall, the booth with the honey sticks. Abigail was allowed to choose one of, and only one. Collins lived for these mornings. They were the only hours that grief felt thin enough to breathe through. Abigail spotted the woman first. She always spotted the hurt ones. It was her strange, painful gift. "Daddy," she whispered, stopping so suddenly he almost tripped over her. "She's leaking." Collins glanced over. He saw the slumped shoulders, the silent shaking, the photograph. His stomach tightened. He knew that particular kind of crying. He'd done it himself in the shower, so Abigail wouldn't hear. After Sarah died. Breast cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. She was 31. Abigail had been 3. Some mornings he still reached across the bed expecting to feel her warmth, and met only cold sheet. He tried to steer them past. "Come on, baby. Some people need space." But Abigail had already slipped her hand free. She marched straight to the bench with that stubborn little stride that meant the subject was closed. Collins followed, heart thumping with the old familiar terror of a father who knows he can't protect his child from everything. Elodie looked up, startled, as a small person in a peach-colored jacket planted herself directly in front of her. The child studied her with solemn, unflinching eyes. "You look like you need a hug," Abigail announced. Not a question. A diagnosis. Elodie tried to smile and failed spectacularly. Tears welled again, hot and humiliating. She hadn't been touched without flinching in months. She managed a nod. Abigail wrapped her arms around Elodie's waist and squeezed with surprising strength for someone who barely reached her ribcage. Elodie's breath hitched. She felt the child's warmth seeping through her thin sweater, smelled faint traces of baby shampoo and maple syrup from breakfast. Something inside her chest cracked wide open. Collins stood a respectful distance away, ready to intervene but somehow knowing he didn't need to. He watched his daughter pat the stranger's back in small, comforting circles, the same way she did for him on the nights the nightmares came. "It's okay," Abigail said softly into Elodie's stomach. "My daddy says crying is how the sad sneaks out so the happy has room to come back in later." Elodie let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She rested one hesitant hand on the child's head, fingers threading gently through soft brown curls. For one suspended moment, the noise of the city fell away. Traffic lights blinking through their cycles for an empty street, gulls wheeling overhead, the distant hiss of an approaching bus. Collins cleared his throat and stepped closer. "Abigail, come on, honey." But the woman. Elodie lifted her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clearer than they'd been in days. "It's all right," she rasped. She's exactly what I needed and didn't know how to ask for." Collins exhaled. He sat on the far end of the bench, keeping Abigail between them like a tiny benevolent bodyguard. "I'm Collins," he said quietly. "This is Abigail." "Elodie," she answered. Her voice sounded like it had been dragged across gravel. Abigail climbed up onto the bench without invitation, wedged herself against Elodie's side, and peered at the photograph. "Who's that?" Elodie swallowed hard. "My mom. She looks happy. She was, most of the time." Elodie traced the edge of the photo with a trembling thumb. "Today's her birthday? Or, it would have been." Abigail nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. "My mommy's in heaven too. She used to sing me 'You Are My Sunshine' when I had bad dreams. Do you know that one?" Elodie's eyes flicked to Collins. He met her gaze, and in that single look whole volumes were exchanged. I know exactly how it feels when the calendar becomes a battlefield. I know what it's like to smile for a child when your heart is in pieces." "Yeah," Elodie whispered. "I know that one." Abigail began to sing, soft and slightly off-key, leaning her head against Elodie's arm. Collins felt his throat close. He hadn't heard that song since Sarah's funeral. When Abigail, 3 years old, had sung it clutching her mother's favorite scarf. Elodie's tears fell again. But slower now, almost peaceful. When the song ended, she rested her cheek briefly on Abigail's hair. "Thank you," she said, voice steadier. "Both of you." The bus pulled up then, brakes sighing. A couple of passengers climbed off, shooting curious glances, but hurrying away. Elodie stood on unsteady legs. She looked suddenly terrified that the moment was ending. Collins made a decision before his brain caught up. "We're headed to the farmer's market," he said. "There's a woman there who makes the best cardamom bread on the planet. Abigail and I usually eat an entire loaf before we get home. You could come with us. If you want. No pressure." Abigail bounced. "Yes. You have to try it with the honey butter. It's like eating a cloud that died happy." Elodie laughed. An actual laugh. Rusty but real. She looked down at her rumpled clothes, her unwashed hair, the photograph still clutched like a talisman. "I look like hell," she said. "You look like someone who's having a really hard day," Collins replied. "We've got experience with those." She hesitated only a second longer. Then she slipped the photograph carefully into her pocket, close to her heart, and took the hand Abigail offered her. The three of them walked toward Hawthorne, Abigail chattering about strawberries and the man who made balloon animals, and how sometimes the goats at the petting zoo tried to eat her jacket. Collins listened to his daughter's voice, weave around the quiet woman beside her, and felt something shift inside him, like a dislocated bone finally sliding back into place. He didn't know then that Elodie would become their Saturday regular, that she would start meeting them at the market every weekend with shy offerings of sketches she'd done during the week, beautiful penciled portraits of Abigail laughing among the flowers. He didn't know that one rainy Tuesday 3 months later she would show up at his doorstep with a suitcase and tears in her eyes because her landlord had sold the building and she had nowhere to go, and that he would open the door wider without a second thought. He didn't know that Abigail would start calling her Ellie and fall asleep on her lap during movie nights, or that Elodie would teach her how to draw faces that looked like they held entire souls behind the eyes. He didn't know that one night, after Abigail was tucked in, he and Elodie would sit on the porch steps, sharing a bottle of cheap red wine, and finally tell each other the stories they carried. Sarah's laugh, and her mother's recipes, and all the small sacred things that hurt too much to say out loud until someone else understood. He didn't know that 2 years later, on a Saturday morning much like this one, he would get down on one knee in front of the cardamom bread booth while Abigail held up a sign that read, "Will you be my mommy and my best friend?" and that Elodie would cry so hard she could only nod. He didn't know any of it yet, but as they walked together, through the gentle Portland drizzle, Abigail swinging between them, holding both their hands, the first fragile thread of something unbreakable was already being woven. Sometimes healing doesn't come from grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from a 6-year-old who refuses to walk past pain without trying to fix it. From a father brave enough to let the world stay broken open a little longer. And from a grieving woman who decided, just for that one morning, to let herself be loved by strangers. The rest wrote itself, one ordinary Saturday at a time. Collins nodded, the motion slow and heavy, as if the weight of 3 years still pressed against his neck every time he admitted it aloud. 3 years now, he said, voice low, rough from sawdust and unspoken nights. Some days the sun comes up and I almost forget. Most days it feels like yesterday. Abigail's small fingers tightened around Elodie's, her palms sticky from donut sugar and absolute certainty. "My mommy's in heaven too," she announced, matter-of-fact the way only children can say it. "Daddy says she's one of the stars now, the really bright one that shows up first. She watches us when we're sleeping so the bad dreams stay away." Elodie's breath caught, a sound like paper tearing. She looked down at the child who had climbed into her broken morning without asking permission and decided to stay. "What was she like?" she asked, the question scraping out raw. "Your mommy?" Abigail didn't even pause. "She made the best pancakes, like clouds with syrup rivers, and she sang all the time. Even when she was folding laundry or brushing my hair. She said singing keeps the sad from sticking to your ribs." She tilted her head, studying Elodie with those grave, luminous eyes. "Daddy says I got her exact eyes. Do you think they look the same?" They did. Collins felt it like a blow behind the sternum every single day, those eyes looking back at him from his daughter's face. Sarah's eyes, alive and asking for more than he sometimes knew how to give. He rested his hand on Abigail's shoulder, partly to steady her, mostly to steady himself. Talking about Sarah still felt like walking across hot coals barefoot. You could do it, but you paid for every step. He turned his attention to Elodie then. Really looked at her for the first time since the bus stop. Beneath the tangled hair and the clothes that carried the faint sourness of too many nights outdoors, there was still someone who had once belonged to the world. The way she formed sentences, even while crying, careful, educated, deliberate, told its own story. She had not always been this version of herself. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle, the same tone he used when Abigail woke from nightmares. Elodie's jaw flexed. Pride and exhaustion fought across her face like clouds crossing the sun. "Different places," she said finally. "The shelter on MLK when they have room, the doorway behind the library when they don't." Sometimes the 24-hour laundromat on Chavez, if I can keep my eyes open long enough to look like I belong. The words landed between them without drama, simple facts delivered in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. Collins felt something hot and helpless rise in his throat. Abigail, never one to miss the important things, looked up at her father with absolute clarity. Daddy, she's hungry, I know, baby. He made the decision before common sense could talk him out of it. We're going to the farmer's market, he said. You're coming with us. My treat. Abigail insists I always pick the bruised apples anyway. Elodie opened her mouth some protest about not wanting charity, about not being a burden, but Abigail was already tugging her forward, small hand fierce around her fingers. Please, the child said. You can teach me how to pick the good ones. Daddy gets the mushy ones every time. Something cracked in Elodie's expression then, a fracture that let the first real laugh escape in months. It sounded rusty, surprised at itself, but it was genuine. All right, she said. I accept my promotion to official apple expert. They walked the 3 blocks to the market linked together, Abigail in the middle swinging between them like a bridge made of sunlight and stubborn hope. She talked the entire way, words spilling out bright and unstoppable. She told Elodie about first grade and Mrs. Patterson's loud voice and how Maya's dog Biscuit once ate an entire crayon box and pooped Rainbow for a week. She asked if Elodie liked dogs, yes. If she had ever seen a real octopus, no. But she'd read about them. If she knew how to braid hair, yes. French braids were her specialty. Elodie answered every question, voice growing steadier with each one. The simple act of being spoken to like a person instead of a problem loosening something locked tight inside her chest. Collins watched them and felt the strangest sensation, like the world had tilted slightly and decided to right itself after all, while Abigail was momentarily distracted by a street violinist playing something mournful and beautiful. He asked quietly, "When's the last time you ate anything warm?" Elodie's step faltered. "Tuesday, I think, or maybe Monday. The days run together when your stomach stops bothering to complain." He nodded like that wasn't a knife in the ribs. "And before everything went wrong, what did you do?" She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I worked at Powell's, the big one on Burnside. Inventory, customer service, ran the children's Saturday story time. I have a master's in library science from Portland State." A ghost of pride flickered across her face, gone almost before it arrived. "Mom got sick. Pancreatic cancer doesn't negotiate. I burned through sick days, vacation days, then just stopped showing up because she needed someone with her 24 hours a day near the end. They let me go 3 weeks before she died. The apartment went 2 months later. Medical bills ate everything. And once you don't have an address, good luck getting another job that requires a W-2 or interview clothes that aren't from the giveaway bin." She shrugged, a motion that tried to be casual and wasn't. "The cracks are wider once you fall through them." Collins knew that spiral intimately. If not for the union job with benefits, if not for his brother Marcus taking Abigail when the grief made him useless, he could have been her icily. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it in a way that went deeper than politeness. "Life rarely is fair," she answered, but her voice softened. "But it's strange 8 months of surviving on fumes. And today, the day that should have destroyed me, your daughter decides a stranger needs a hug. And suddenly I'm walking to a farmer's market like nothing ever broke." "You are still a person," Collins said firmly. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Before she could answer, Abigail came barreling back, grabbing both their hands again. "We're here. Come on. The donuts smell like heaven." The market enveloped them in color and sound and smell fresh bread, roasting coffee, damp earth, kettle corn popping, buskers playing guitar, children laughing, dogs barking at each other across booths. For a moment Elodie just stopped in the entrance, eyes wide, drinking it in like someone who'd forgotten color existed. Collins watched her face and saw the exact second memory and longing collided. "Apples first," Abigail declared, dragging them toward a stand piled high with every variety: Honey Crisp, Granny Smith, Pink Lady, Cosmic Crisp, heirlooms with names like Winesap and Northern Spy. Elodie came alive in a way that made Collins's chest hurt. She picked up a Honey Crisp, turned it in the light, pressed gently along the skin. "See this?" she told Abigail, crouching to her level. "No soft spots. Firm all the way around. Look at the color, bright red with that golden undertone means it ripened on the tree, not in a warehouse. Now smell the stem end." She held it to Abigail's nose. "Fresh, sweet, a little like cider. That's the one you want." Abigail inhaled dramatically and nodded with solemn authority. "That's a perfect apple." They filled a bag that way, Elodie teaching, Abigail absorbing every word like gospel, Collins carrying the growing weight and feeling lighter than he had in years. When Abigail asked how she knew so much, Elodie's eyes went far away. "My mom grew up on a farm in eastern Oregon. She taught me every Saturday when I was little. We'd come home with bags so heavy we had to take the bus because they wouldn't fit in her bike basket. I haven't been to a market since she died. Couldn't afford a single apple." Collins bought 3 apple cider donuts, still hot from the oil, handed one to Aloke with a look that dared her to refuse. She didn't. When she bit into it, her eyes closed and her shoulders shook with something that wasn't quite crying. Cinnamon sugar stuck to her lip. She licked it off like a kid. They found a bench near the juggler. Abigail sat cross-legged on the ground, completely entranced by the flying pins. Collins turned to Elodie Hart, hammering against his ribs like it wanted out. "I have a proposition," he said carefully, "and I want you to really hear me before you answer." She went very still. "I have a studio apartment above the garage. It's been empty 6 months. Needs cleaning, probably paint, but it has heat, hot water, a little kitchenette, separate entrance. It's yours if you want it." Elodie opened her mouth, closed it again. "Collins, I can't pay. I'm not asking for money." He took a breath that felt like jumping off a cliff. "I'm asking for help. I work 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. Abigail's in after-school care until 6, and she hates it. It's just television and goldfish crackers in a church basement. I come home wrecked, heat up frozen crap, fall asleep before I finish the bedtime story half the time. She deserves better than that. She deserves someone who picks her up at 3, helps with homework, makes sure she eats vegetables that aren't French fries. Someone who reads to her with different voices and braids her hair and teaches her how to pick the perfect apple." He looked at her straight on. "You ran children's programming at Powell's. Abigail trusted you within 30 seconds of meeting you, which she doesn't do, ever, not since her mom. I'm offering a trade room board, privacy, and a little stipend when I can manage it in exchange for being there for my daughter when I can't be. You'd have your own Collins stood there in the bright bustle of the farmer's market, the smell of cider and warm dough still clinging to the air between them, and tried to find words that didn't sound like charity or pity. "We could help each other," he said again, quieter this time, almost embarrassed by how true it felt. Elodie stared at him, eyes glassy, the half-eaten donut forgotten in her hand, sugar crumbling onto the toes of her worn boots. "Why would you do this?" she asked, voice cracked open like thin ice. "You don't even know my last name." "I know you're educated," Collins answered, steady. "I heard it in the way you talk even when you're crying. I know you loved someone so much it's still killing you 8 months later. I know you're capable hell. You just taught my kid more about apples in 10 minutes than I've managed in 6 years. And I know my daughter, who usually hides behind my legs when strangers say hello, walked straight up to you and decided you needed hugging." He met her eyes without flinching. "And I know what it feels like to be drowning and have no one throw you a rope." The tears came again then, sliding down Elodie's cheeks in 2 clean lines, but they were Anetafront tears, slower, almost wondering. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll think about it," Collins told her. "Offer stands. No pressure, no savior complex. I'm just a tired single dad who is barely keeping his head above water and needs help. You need help. Seems like basic math." Elodie let out a wet, shaky laugh. "Basic math," she repeated, like the phrase tasted foreign and sweet. "That's what you're calling this. What would you call it?" She looked at him for a long, long moment, wind tugging strands of blonde hair across her mouth. "I'd call it the kindest thing anyone has done for me since my mother took her last breath." Abigail came barreling back then, powdered sugar smeared across her nose like war paint, eyes wide with the juggler's 5-ball cascade still burning behind them. "Daddy, can you juggle?" she demanded. "Not even a little bit, baby." She studied the adults, sensing the thickness in the air the way children always do. Her gaze settled on Elodie's wet face. Without a word she wrapped her small arms around Elodie's waist and squeezed hard, cheek pressed to the dirty sweater. "I'm glad we found you today," she said, muffled. Elodie's hand came up slowly, trembling, and rested on the back of Abigail's head. Over the child's curls, she looked at Collins. "Could I have a little time to think about it?" "Of course, all the time you need." "I don't have a phone right now," she admitted, shame flickering across her face. Collins fished a receipt from his pocket, the donut stand, and scribbled his number in black ink. "Belmont Library opens at 10 tomorrow. Abigail and I do Sunday story time at 10:30. If you want to talk more, or if you decide yes, or even if you decide no and just want to say goodbye, we'll be there." Elodie took the scrap of paper like it was made of glass, folding it into the smallest square and tucking it into the pocket with her mother's photograph. "Belmont Library, 10:30, no pressure," he said again. "If it feels wrong, you owe us nothing, but if it feels right, we'll make it work." When it was time to part Collins and Abigail toward the truck, Elodie toward whatever doorway or shelter might have space, that night Abigail suddenly grabbed Elodie's coat. "You'll come tomorrow, right? To the library." Elodie knelt, knees cracking, and looked straight into those brown eyes that already carried too much knowing. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with how certain it sounded. "I'll be there, I promise." Abigail held out her pinky. Elodie linked hers through it, without hesitation, the small ritual sealing something neither of them fully understood yet. That night Collins tucked Abigail in. The bedtime routine, the same as always: 3 books, 1 song, 2 kisses, night light on dim. But when he turned to leave, she spoke into the dark. "Daddy, why did you ask Elodie to come live with us?" He sat back down on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "Remember last month when you had that nightmare about the monsters under the bed? And I said hugging Mr. Bunny made them go away? Yeah, sometimes grown-ups get nightmares too. Only ours don't hide under the bed." They follow us around in daylight. Elodie's got some big ones right now. She lost her mommy and everything that kept her safe. I thought maybe we could be the Mr. Bunny for her. And maybe she could help keep our monsters away too. Like when Uncle Marcus and Aunt Jen brought us macaroni and cheese for 3 weeks straight after Mommy went to heaven. Exactly like that. Abigail was quiet for a long time, thumb stroking Mr. Bunny's worn ear. Then, I think Mommy would really like L.D. Collins, felt his heart fold in on itself. Why do you say that, baby? Because Mommy always said the best way to fix your own broken heart is to help fix somebody else's. Remember, when we took the daisies to Miss Sonia after Mr. Harold died? He remembered. Sarah had said it, leaning against the kitchen counter, 9 months pregnant, rubbing her swollen belly. 3 months before a routine gallbladder surgery turned into a code blue and a flat line, and a world without her in it. He leaned down and kissed Abigail's forehead, tasting salt where his own tears had fallen without permission. You're right, he whispered. Mommy would love her. After Abigail's breathing evened out into sleep, Colleen sat on the couch with a beer gone warm in his hand and stared at the dark television screen. His reflection looked back tired eyes, sawdust still in the creases of his knuckles. 3-day stubble because shaving felt pointless some weeks. Inviting a stranger to live 20 feet from his daughter's bedroom window. People would call him insane. His own brother would probably try to talk him out of it. But something in his gut quiet, steady, certain kept saying this was right, that Elodie was in danger. She was the opposite. She was the rope he'd been too proud to admit he needed to. He texted Marcus. Did something potentially insane today. Might tell you tomorrow. Might need you to talk me out of it. Or possibly back me up. Marcus. As long as it's not a motorcycle or a pyramid scheme. I'm listening. Collins smiled in the dark, went to bed with the windows open so the cold November air could bite some sense into him. It didn't work. He fell asleep thinking of pinky promises and library story times, and a woman who might walk through the door tomorrow carrying everything she owned in a single backpack. Sunday morning he was up before the sun, scrubbing the garage apartment like it had personally offended him. He swept out dead leaves and spiderwebs, wiped down the little countertop, changed the furnace filter, even bought a cheap set of sheets, the color of soft sky, because the old ones smelled like neglect. He plugged in the mini-fridge and made sure the hot water works stood under the shower, himself just to be sure it didn't sputter. The place was small, 400 square feet at most, but it had good light from 2 windows and its own entrance, and a lock that worked. It felt possible. At 10:15, he and Abigail were in the truck. Her hair braided neatly because she'd insisted on the French braid Elodie had mentioned she knew how to do. At 10:27 they walked into the Belmont Library children's section, the familiar smell of old paper and carpet shampoo wrapping around them like a hug. Collins's pulse hammered in his throat. He pretended to study the new releases while scanning the entrance every 12 seconds. Abigail tugged his hand. Do you think she'll come? I don't know, baby, she promised. Sometimes grown-ups break promises when they get scared. Abigail considered this solemnly. Then we'll just have to not be scary. At 10:29, the library doors opened again, and Elodie stepped through. Hair brushed for the first time in weeks. Wearing the cleanest clothes she owned, which still weren't very clean, and clutching the receipt with Collins's number like a passport to a country she wasn't sure would let her in. She spotted them immediately. Abigail broke free and ran full speed, slamming into Elodie's legs with the force of absolute faith. Elodie dropped to her knees right there on the children's room rug, arms wrapping around the little girl, face buried in peach-scented curls. Collins walked over slowly, hands in his pockets so she wouldn't see them shaking. Hi, he said. Hi, she answered, voice thick. She stood up, Abigail still attached to her hip like a koala. I thought about it all night. Walked until my legs stopped working. Sat in the 24-hour donut place on 82nd until they kicked me out at 5. And every single time I tried to talk myself out of this, I kept hearing your daughter's voice telling me crying lets the sad out so the happy has room. She took a breath that seemed to cost her everything. If the offer's still open, I'd like to try. Collins felt something vast and warm crack open inside his chest, like sunrise after the longest night of his life. Offer's still open, he managed. Abigail let out a whoop that earned them stern librarian glares from 3 directions. Does that mean Ellie's coming home with us? Elodie laughed freely, laughed in. The sound was rusty and beautiful and alive. Yeah, she said, looking at Collins, eyes shining. I guess it does. They stayed for story time after all. Elodie sat cross-legged on the rug between Abigail and a dozen other kids, doing all the animal noises for Deer Zoo with perfect seriousness. Collins watched from the back row and felt, for the first time in 3 years, like maybe the story wasn't over, like maybe the worst chapter had ended and they were finally, carefully, turning the page. That afternoon they stopped at the store for the things Elodie hadn't owned in months: toothbrush, shampoo that didn't. On the pale November library steps, with the weak sun glinting off the wet pavement, and the smell of wood smoke in the air, Elodie stood clutching her backpack straps like they were the only thing keeping her from floating away. I thought about your offer all night, she said, the words tumbling out rough in sleep. I walked until my legs gave out. Sat in the all-night burrito place on 82nd until they turned the chairs up. And every single time I tried to find a reason to say no. I kept coming back to Abigail's face when she hugged me. I want this. I want it so much it hurts. But you need to know exactly what you're inviting in. I own literally nothing except what's in this bag. Powell's won't give me a reference. They call it job abandonment when your dying mother needs you more than inventory does. I haven't had an address in 4 months. I shower at the Y when I can afford the drop-in fee or not at all. I'm not the woman who ran Storytime anymore. I'm the woman people pretend not to see. Collins listened without interrupting, hands in his coat pockets, breath fogging between them. When she finally ran out of warnings, he said quietly, I'm not the man Jennifer married either. I'm the guy who forgot birthdays and let the laundry pile up until it became furniture. I'm the guy who sat in the hospital parking lot for 3 hours after she died, because I couldn't figure out how to drive home and tell our 3-year-old her mommy wasn't coming back. None of us get to stay who we were. The question is whether we let it finish us or not. Elodie searched his face for the lie, the pity, the moment he'd changed his mind. She didn't find any of it. I won't let Abigail down, she said fiercely. I swear on my mother's grave. Then let's do a 1-week trial, he said. You stay in the apartment. You help with Abby. We see if it works for all 3 of us. 7 days. If any of us wants out after that, we part as friends. No guilt, no explanations. The relief hit her so hard her knees almost buckled. That's more than I deserve. You deserve a hell of a lot more than you've gotten lately, he said. So is that a yes? She laughed through the tears that wouldn't stop coming lightly. Yes, it's a yes. Abigail, who had been vibrating beside them the entire time, let out a wild whoop and did a cartwheel right there on the library steps. Landing in a pile of wet leaves and laughing like the world had just been fixed, they drove home. Through southeast Portland's quiet streets, past houses already strung with early Christmas lights because people needed something to hope for, Collins led her around the back to the garage apartment. Key scratching in the lock, heart hammering harder than it had any right to. The place was small, plain, smelled faintly of sawdust and old paint. But the windows worked and the deadbolt turned with a solid thunk. Elodie stepped inside and stopped dead. She touched the countertop like it might vanish, turned on the faucet and watched hot water pour out, opened the bathroom door and just stared at the clean shower curtain. She sat on the futon, bounced once, then stood up again like she was afraid to claim space. Then she turned to him with tears streaming and whispered, It's perfect. It's a garage apartment with peeling paint and a loud heater, he said. It has a door that locks from the inside, she answered, voice cracking wide open. It has hot water that doesn't run out after 2 minutes and a toilet that isn't shared with 20 strangers and a bed that no one will crawl into while I'm sleeping. Collins, it's perfect. He left her with clean sheets that smelled like lavender, towels still warm from the dryer, a bag of groceries, and the house key on a piece of blue ribbon he found in Abigail's craft box because it felt right somehow. That night, Elodie showered until her fingers pruned and the mirror completely fogged, used half the bottle of shampoo just because she could, stood under the water and cried so hard her ribs hurt, then crawled into bed wearing one of Collins's old flannel shirts she found in the donation pile and slept 12 hours without dreaming once. Monday, she walked to Bridal Mile Elementary, in shoes that didn't have holes yet, stood at the gate trying to look like she belonged among the minivans and Patagonia jackets, and when Abigail spotted her and came running full tilt screaming, Ellie, across the playground, something frozen inside Elodie's chest cracked clean open. They did homework with goldfish, crackers, and apple slices cut into bunny shapes, because Abigail insisted. Elodie cooked real spaghetti with meat sauce that didn't come from a jar and garlic bread made from scratch. And when Collins walked in the door at 6:30 and smelled it, he stopped dead in the entryway, eyes suddenly bright, because the house hadn't smelled like actual food in years. By Wednesday, Abigail was reading whole sentences without stumbling. By Friday, she was begging to start the Magic Treehouse books. The trial week ended on a Sunday neither adult mentioned, and Elodie just kept showing up every morning with her hair brushed and her heart trying to grow back into its proper shape. 3 months later, the apartment had curtains. Elodie sewed from clearance fabric at the fabric store on Foster, walls painted the soft cream of early morning light using leftover paint from Collins's job sites. A tiny bookshelf scavenged from the curb on trash day, now holding library books and Abigail's drawings taped everywhere, like wallpaper. Elodie had a real job, 12 hours a week at Belmont Library shelving books and reading Pete the Cat to toddlers on Saturday mornings, and the first paycheck with her name on it made her sit in the credit union parking lot and cry into her sleeves because it was proof she still existed on paper. Abigail moved up to reading levels and started talking about her mom without her face folding in on itself. Her teacher sent home a note that said, "Whatever you're doing at home, please don't stop." Collins started noticing dangerous things. The way Elodie's laugh had come all the way back from wherever it had been hiding. The way she sang off-key to the radio while doing dishes. The way the sunlight through the kitchen window caught in her hair and turned it into something holy. The way his heart did a stupid flip every time she leaned over the table to help with homework and her t-shirt slipped, just enough to show the scatter of freckles Across her collarbone, like a secret constellation, he told himself it was gratitude. He was very good at lying when survival required it. 6 months after the morning that changed everything, the backyard became a riot of green. Collins built raised beds from scrap lumber on his first weekend off in months, muscles burning in the good way, while Elodie and Abigail planted tomatoes, peppers, basil, zucchini, sunflowers that would grow taller than Abigail by August. Abigail came in at dusk, filthy and ecstatic, dirt in her hair and under every nail, declaring herself the best farmer in Portland. They ordered pizza and ate it on the porch steps because the kitchen felt too small for how large everything suddenly seemed. Abigail fell asleep mid-sentence about how tomatoes were technically fruit and therefore pizza was a smoothie. Head lolling against Elodie's shoulder, Collins carried her to bed, came back out, and sat beside Elodie in the soft spring dark. "Thank you," he said, voice rough with everything he hadn't said yet, "for the garden, for bringing her back to life, for bringing me back." "She makes it easy," Elodie said softly. "You both do." He was quiet for a long time, thumb rubbing across the callus on his palm. "Her name was Jennifer," he said finally. "Routine gallbladder surgery. They said the risk of pulmonary embolism was less than 1%. She kissed me goodbye at 7:30 and told me to bring her a chocolate milkshake when she woke up. By noon, she was gone. I got 45 minutes to hold her hand while machines breathed for her. I never got to tell her all the things I meant to say when we had more time. I've been carrying that around like a piano on my back for 3 years." Elodie reached over and took his hand. Her palm was warm, earth-stained from planting. "Steady. I've been scared to feel anything," he went on, voice cracking open, because feeling anything meant feeling everything. "And I didn't know how to do that and still be who Abigail needed. But lately, I'm feeling things again, and it's because of you." She turned to him then, eyes shining in the porch light, and the look she gave him was so careful, so full of hard-won hope it stole his breath. "My mom used to say grief doesn't shrink," she whispered. "You just grow around it, like tree rings. The scar stays, but there's room now. Room for tomatoes and terrible pizza and sunsets and maybe this." He leaned in slowly, giving her every out. She met him halfway. Their kiss tasted like pizza grease and spring air and second chances neither of them had dared to believe in. When they pulled apart, foreheads still touching, he laughed, once shaky, incredulous. "Alive. Stay," he whispered. "I never left," she whispered back. Years later, when people asked how they found each other, Abigail told now, fierce and kind and rolling her eyes, would say, "I saw a sad lady at a bus stop and decided she looked like she needed a hug. Best decision of my life." And Elodie and Collins would look at each other across whatever ordinary, miraculous moment they were in, kitchen table covered in homework, backyard thick with tomatoes, hospital room holding their second daughter, and know that sometimes the universe has to break you, exactly where you need to be cracked, so the light can pour in. Sometimes all it takes is one 6-year-old who refuses to walk past pain, one father brave enough to trust her heart, and one grieving woman willing to believe, against everything, that she